What's happening, folks? Jig night. Here we go. Here we go. What is happening, folks? Welcome to Jig Night. I am Mike Murphy, aka Barracuda. This is Jig Squad Live and the Tackle Making Podcast. And I am, as always, very excited to be here talking with you all. I love seeing everyone in chat. Everyone starts rolling in as the minutes go by. But tonight, I'm super excited. So we have I'm going to call it. This is like we the second show in a row where we have a southern type of company coming in, a jig maker, and I'm super excited to bring John in tonight from TrueSouth Custom Lures, and we have some fun talk. So for everyone in chat, I'm going to hit you up. Chris, nice to see you. Andrew, Fishing 262, Michael Bradley, welcome, guys. And the rest of the crew will come running in, the usuals, and probably some new peeps. But without further ado, let's get at it. Darius, Bass, what's happening? Let's get John in here. John,
Hey,
what's up, buddy? Welcome to Jig Squad Live. How are you, man?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So for everyone in chat, or if you're listening on replay later, I had, and you guys hear me say this all the time, there's so many different great jig designers out there, jig companies, but I've always kind of had like an eye on TrueSouth Custom Lures and their jigs. And the reason is because they were just clean, they were crisp, they were and it was real I don't know. I was kind of like, this is it. I like these guys. They run a clean business. And I said, you know what? These are going to be somebody I have to get on. And after talking with John a little bit more, I feel pretty good that it reaffirms my liking of this company. I can't wait for you guys to hear the story tonight. So, John, enough of me babbling starting off, but tell us about you a little bit, and then we'll get into the history a little bit. Tell us about your company, and then I want to hear the backstory as well too.
Okay, well, as far as our company itself, we are 100% build everything in-house kind of company. So we are basically a plastic company and a jig company, wire and lead baits and all that stuff too. But it's biz baits with TrueSouth Custom Lures in there as a brand. So
okay,
if people don't understand that, it's kind of like we brought two companies together. Biz Baits being the mother company, and us in there as a brand or a line of baits is
okay.
our company. So we have 3 full-time employees. We're very small considering what's out there, as far as a production company, but we do everything in-house. So we don't outsource. We spin cast and hand pour and paint and tie everything in-house. Same thing with our plastics. We do all injection stuff at our shop in Concord, North Carolina.
Super cool. And so just to reiterate some of the things that John says, you'll hear me repeat things sometimes, and that's probably just the educator in me, right? So the TrueSouth is combined and paired up with Biz Baits. So if you go to actually Biz Baits website, you're going to find the TrueSouth jig. So that is one company. They are together, and you can also, here's the other thing too, right, John? I think Tackle Warehouse has all your jigs, spinner baits. I call them the undressed jigs, whether it be Ned jigs, finesse jigs, things like that. But so the Tackle Warehouse or Biz Baits are the two primary spots where they can get the TrueSouth custom jigs, correct?
Yeah, you can go to Tackle Warehouse. Tackle Warehouse carries the complete line of TrueSouth stuff that we offer outside of custom, but I don't think they carry the complete line of biz baits yet, but they will probably in the future. And then we have our website, which is bizbaits.com, where you can buy everything. And we have local dealers. We really do care about the mom and pop and the brick and mortar stores around the country. So we do have those dealers as well.
Okay. Which is really cool. And I want to make sure we take some time tonight, John, to talk obviously about the jigs. I want you to have a chance to kind of share your ideas behind color and all these different things. Yeah. But before we get to that, you guys, I had this awesome conversation with John the other day, and he kind of walked me through like the history of TrueSouth, right? and how he started off as a jig maker, and then went on to talk about how it's kind of become the company it is today and partnering up with Biz Baits. And I love the story, and it was awesome. So John, walk everyone in chat or on replay down this pathway about you as a jig maker. When did that start? And then how did that development of True South kind of sprawl from that initial experience of you becoming a jig maker?
Right. So as a kid, I've always enjoyed fishing. So my dad, my grandfather always took me fishing, and I kind of got into bass fishing into like probably high school. And I joined the bass club, of course, and enjoyed that part of it. And a bunch of us guys in the bass club started fishing the Redman Tournament Trail, which was before the BFLs and eventually became the BFLs. And we started fishing those.
Oh yeah.
And, like there was just sometimes I wanted to tinker with tackle. So I really enjoyed tinkering with tackle and
Sure.
making stuff for myself. And then over those years, I always made my own jigs. Either I buy heads and tied them back in the day. I really never poured jigs until about probably 15 years ago.
Okay.
But I mean, I've been fishing a long time, but like I really enjoyed making my own tackle and then like giving some to my buddies and them saying, "Hey, man, like they really work good. Like I enjoy fishing with them. I caught a lot of fish," and that's kind of how I started making tackle in the beginning.
Okay.
And then later on, when I met my wife and we started fishing a lot together in a couple style trail, I started making some more stuff. And I said, I'm gonna start like pouring my own heads and painting my own heads and making them for people. And
Sure.
as that progressed into, I'm just gonna make jigs. Then it's like, oh man, you got to make buzz baits too. Then you got to make spinner baits. You might as well pour some terminal tackle too. And
Sure.
before I know it, I've got a bunch of molds and a little setup in my shop. And,
Sure.
uh, I was working for a chemical company. That was my career basically. And my wife really encouraged me to start a website. She's like, you ought to sell that stuff that all your buddies are trying to get from you. Why don't you start a little website and go from there? And then from there it went to, oh my gosh, now I can't like work full time and fish and make jigs and stuff. So eventually, about 4 or 5 years into that website, she just encouraged me to go ahead and retire from my job and do it full time. We'll step off a cliff here and try to make it work. And
Scary,
like,
right?
yeah, dude, I'm telling
Sure.
you, like it's like jumping off a cliff and not even seeing the bottom. And
I can
that happened,
imagine.
and it was tough. Like for 4 or 5 years, it was extremely tough. You're competing against Chinese manufacturers. You're competing against everybody else. I mean, you're trying to get your brand out there. You're trying to establish who you are in the industry. So that's kind of how it went along for a while. And then I met Brian Souza from Biz Baits when he moved from Illinois down to North Carolina around Lake Norman, and we became friends. And we kind of cross promoted some stuff for each other since he made
Sure.
plastics and stuff. And then that's how, one day Brian calls me out of the blue. It was like during COVID. And he's like, have you ever thought about like joining forces with like another company?
Right.
And
Right.
I was like, yeah, I have, man, but I really don't know who I would do it with. And he's like, what about me? And, so, hey, man, it kind of worked. Like it really it made a lot of sense for both of us to combine our businesses and bring us some more help in so we could, up our production and fulfill our orders faster. And that's kind of how we got going. I mean, it's, we had like on the TrueSouth side of things before I joined with Brian, I had like
Sure.
50 stock colors and all these options. So we had to really scale down our line to get started. And then we're slowly kind of scale it back up from there,
It's that concept is so interesting. So Paladin, Pandemonium Paladin says in chat, he goes, "Hey, these are the buzz baits I had you tie up with Sexy Shad and Green Pumpkin. Couldn't miss this one." So you have some
Yeah.
fans out there. So what's so interesting about what you say, John, is that well, a couple things. One, let me just make a comment about Brian Souza. So guys, funny enough, Brian Souza, he's an Illinois guy, right?
Yeah.
He's got a phenomenal story as well. And I happened upon interacting with Brian Souza a little bit just by chance and messaging on social media, right?
Right.
And through that messaging, I was kind of like, what a great guy this is. But and then I kind of I don't think I knew originally that was that direct connection with TrueSouth. Like I basically started following TrueSouth for a while with the jigs, and then I found out that it was combined, and I didn't put those two together. But
Right.
what I've come to find out is like I kind of really value both of these two companies. They just have a lot of really clean stuff. The marketing's not overdone. I just kind of like them. And the funny thing, John, about what you're saying, is the volume of like colors and stuff. Like, so every jig maker out there has, six different favorite colors, whether it be of you or your friends, right?
Right. Right. Everybody has their confidence color,
Yes. And then there's the other 50 designs that you've come up with over time. And there's always like one or two oddball ones that a friend likes, or they kind of never make it into your regular rotation. You may love it,
Yeah.
but they just don't become part of your regular rotation. But
Right.
very interesting enough, from a company business perspective, you kind of you got to get yourself narrowed down to what
Exactly.
you do. And there's other companies out there that don't think that way. They
Yeah.
think that I'm going to put 50 colors up on the site, and I want to be able to look at colors and say, hey, you know what? I really like that color. And if I have 50 to pick from, I
Yeah.
don't know. I
Well,
can't pick one over the other sometimes, truthfully.
yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes, you don't want to confuse your customers. So I feel like sometimes if you offer too many options, they don't know which way to go with it. So Brian and I, when we got together, and he has the same story as me, man, he started off in his grandmother's basement, and we both our wives are nurses. So we kind of like understand that whole vibe too. And we know that we had to scale down the TrueSouth line because we have 200 SKUs right now just on the TrueSouth side of things. Before, I probably had 400 because I had options of hooks, I had options of skirt type, I had options of colors.
Right.
Like I had a lot of colors, and I still have them in my head. I don't have them
Sure.
written down anywhere. I mean, I could just like, if somebody says, "Oh man, make the Norman Magic color," we don't make it now, but I could make it. You know what I mean? So I feel like we tried to make sure we have a good broad spectrum of colors. Of course, we picked our popular colors, but I wanted to put something out there where we had a complete line of base and colors that fit every situation as much as possible without confusing our customers. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does. So the primary categories for you, John, in TrueSouth is you got a swim jig,
Yeah.
you've got a finesse ball head,
Right.
you've got a football,
Right.
and you've got like a flipping jig, which I'm gonna use the term sparky, but it's not a true
Yeah.
sparky head, sparky or arky styled
Yeah. It's
head.
probably our fat head flipping jig is the all-purpose jig. You can do
That's it.
a lot of stuff with it. You can skip it. You can swim it. You can drag it. You can do about anything with that jig alone without having to have any of the other ones, basically.
Very, very, very cool. So besides those primary colors and stuff, what day in and day out when you're out, when you get a chance to go fishing, all right,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
that happens, do you have your own few little favorites outside of your color lines that are like, or are you fishing mostly those color lines
Well,
when you're going out fishing?
I'm extremely simple when it comes to my colors. Like, GP Brown, that is my standard color jig. I can change the trailer up any way I want. I can put a sapphire blue on it. I can put brown. I can put GP on it. It's so versatile, just that color. It's a basic brown jig with a little bit of green pumpkin in it. Outside of that, I probably, down here in the South, we do swim a white jig a lot, but it's really more dock skipping kind of deal during shad.
Sure.
So I definitely have a white jig in my box. I have a GP Brown. I have some type of dark color like, black and blue. One of the colors I used to make years ago was, I called it 3B. It was black, brown, and blue. It was a solid flipping color. During the spring, when the water's dirty and cold, that was my go-to color. And then I'll have a bluegill color. And we talked about this before, but like my little girl when she was 6 put together the male crawl jig, which is basically a crawfish, bluegill, blue crab style imitating jig that just is so versatile and it catches them everywhere.
By the way, after you and I talked, I went back to go look at that color, and it is phenomenal. I mean, the part that I like about it the most, obviously, is the blue shimmer, the blue craw accents that you threw in there.
Yeah.
That are just phenomenal. Talk about that color a little bit, about how that color came to be, because I've heard this story, and
Right.
I want you to tell it. Do you have any in front of you or around you?
I posted one on Instagram yesterday, I think.
You did.
I don't have one right in front of me right now.
That's okay.
Because if I was at the shop, I could grab you all you want. But one day
that's the Instagram, guys. You could find John's stuff on TrueSouth Custom Lures on Instagram. But yeah, really cool. You should check out the color.
So she was in this. My little girl, of course, I had my shop at my house for forever until the last couple of years when we moved to our new shop with Biz Baits.
Sure.
So I'm out here in my shop making jigs all the time, and I mean, dude, I'll be out here till midnight sometimes trying to fulfill orders and keep my customers caught up, which is almost impossible when you do everything by yourself.
Right, I got you.
So she comes out here, and I had like a GP Blue jig, and I had a Magic Crawl jig, and I had a Hot Crawl style jig with the Hot Crawl tab in it. And she's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Well, I mean, these are our 3 most popular jigs right now." And she's like, "Well, why don't you just take one of each tab or part of each tab and like put them together?" And she like picks them up, puts them together, and I look down at it and I'm like, "Dude, that thing is right. Like it has the colors you want, because you know how the crawls look. They get that bluish color, that Magic Crawl color. They get some green pumpkin in them, and they get a little orange on them,
Yes.
And just the colors flow together so well. I was like, well, shoot, I'll just make this color. And I'll call it, she's getting ready to start middle school. So I don't call her Mel anymore. I call her Melody. So that was the deal. And that's one of our most popular colors to date. It's crazy how it sounds. And, we talked about colors and how they come together. And it's just like you can put stuff together that you think's going to look good and it just doesn't. And then you pick up a few tabs and add a little accent to something and you say, oh, yeah, that's it. Because you know it as soon as you see it. You know the color you're going for. And when you do that, it's like, that's it right there.
Yeah. And, it's funny, John, because that's like when I talk about my own like design preferences, like that's what I talk about when I say color is that it's the flow of color. Does it come together to look like something? Right. And this is not a knock on anyone out there at all. I mean, there's so many different companies. There's a lot of companies that will offer a lot of different jig colors, right? And and one of the things is there's like one slight change or 2 slight changes, and I look at it and I look at some jigs sometimes. I go, wow, that looks cool, but I have to say that sometimes the colors don't, even though I like it, the colors don't make sense to me.
Right.
And so I highlighted a comment by Brian Schmidt, right? And he says smart confidence colors, obviously, right? Those are just like you were talking about. And then an oddball color. Now, the interesting thing about an oddball color, and this is the part that keeps me designing, because if it wasn't for the oddball colors, I wouldn't make a lot of stuff anymore, because I got to tell you, I'm a GP guy. Like I believe I can make GP work anywhere, right? But aside from that, oddball colors are cool from the end that season to season, or year to year, I should say. Well, season to season as well. There are sometimes oddball colors that work really well one year on a particular body of water, and then that might change to another color the next year. And I've watched that happen on the south end of Lake Michigan several times. And I've also watched it happen on the river systems in Midwest Illinois and Northern Illinois.
Yeah.
And so that is why those oddball colors keep me excited about trying new and different things, because I think that, but they definitely, I'll be honest with you, they definitely don't. The only time they get remade is when they catch. And usually I only got 1 or 2 of them, and then I go and make more and pass them out. Right.
Yeah. So over the years, I've made some of those oddball colors that I thought like, man, these things just, I don't know if they're going to work right or not. And the guys go out and they smash them on them. But I mean, part of that to me is like, it when you're trying a new color, you have to catch fish on, or you're not going to have confidence in it. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
But like, I've made some crazy, like purple and black with like Carolina blue colors.
Yeah.
That guys fish in clear water that you would think that, oh, that's not going to work, but it works. So
Right.
I'm not saying all colors work. And it's really like sometimes it's the circumstance and sometimes it's the body of water. I know spotted bass for me, like around Lake Norman and stuff here, they tend to
Mm-hmm.
like oddball colors. I don't know why, but they just
Mm-hmm.
do. I don't know if it stands out from everything else or
Sure.
whatever. They tend to bite. Like I think I could just make a solid color pink jig and go out there and catch
Right.
one sometimes.
Right. And and John, I've always said, like, for me, like, there's people who say color doesn't matter. There's say color. I love color. I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. And I even go and talk sometimes. Like there's two, like, and I've mentioned this before on Jig Squad Live in the show. I've said I can look at certain designers and I can pick their jigs out. Um,
Right.
if you were to show me pictures, I could pick their jigs out because of the
Mhm.
color designs and how they build their jigs. And let me give you an example. There's some designers that I think that are, well, there's earth tone designers, let's call it that way. There's
Yeah.
somebody that, if somebody's creating an earth tone design, it doesn't mean they don't create oddball colors and other things too.
Right.
But you could see a tendency of certain designers that are more geared towards the browns, rusts, and things like that. And then there's other designers that you see more in the greens and deeper blues and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just see it. And maybe I'm crazy. Maybe it's just me, but when I think of color flow, like, I look at designers when they're making those earthy type of toned patterns, and I look and I'm like, they're a brown designer. And I don't like the brown designs as much as I like the greens and blues and earth tones in
Right.
that category, as opposed to the browns, the rusts, the beiges, the tans. And it's so funny because I've never heard anyone else talk about that. I say that, and it's weird because I feel like I'm the only one thinking about things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But then here, the best part is, I'll give you an example. So when on some of your jig designs, one of the cool features that you have is that you use some of your skirting materials you use has whether it be the tiger patterns or whatever people want to call it, they're
Right.
broken up with some of the black. Well, I love that. I love those broken up patterns for those different colors too. So it's just interesting to see how people go about
Yeah.
designing colors and jigs and what it looks like. What do you
Right.
think
I
about
mean,
that?
you can build like a brown jig, but like everybody builds a different brown jig because like you don't have like for me, it's very hard for me to put one single color in a jig. If it's brown, I tend to go brown and then add another tone of brown to give it some texture.
I
I don't
got you.
I mean it's just it's the way I am. But not that it doesn't work if you just put straight brown in it. But I like some texture, and that's why I use like different versus like I'll use like different tab designs. Sometimes it's Dalmatian, sometimes it's the bait fish pattern on them. Sometimes I use straight like just colors with some flake in it. But I like to break that up a little bit with some texture. But I mean, they're all like I love to look at everybody's jigs, and I see their like tendencies, but I really enjoy everybody's stuff. Like it's just
I
awesome
agree.
to see. Like sometimes I'll see a color and like that color right there is money. Like just it's beautiful. Like outside of the if it catches fish or not, it's just like artwork to me. So I really enjoy like all the custom designers and stuff. I used to do so much more custom than I do now. But we're not just
Yeah.
not able to trying to keep inventory and all that stuff up. Because we try to ship our customers their order within a day of ordering.
Yeah, and that makes sense
That's the
too.
hard part. Like when
Sure.
I was doing it here by myself, everything was made to order. I get 3-4 weeks out sometimes, and it would bother me because I know that these guys want their stuff, but They were, I
Right.
mean, customers were great. They were very patient. They understood that I just couldn't please everybody that fast. But it is nice to be able to now like have help in the shop to build these jigs and to keep things going. And guys order stuff and they get it faster than what they would get from Tackle Warehouse sometimes from us.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I get that. I mean, and it's funny because the one thing that I've learned too by talking to different people, John, is that, even though there's some guys like yourself included, you own a business, right?
Yeah.
But aside from that, the one common denominator that I keep seeing that comes up, right, is that no one ever has, not one person I've spoken to has lost that edge of their thrill of design and creating. And even though you have a prescribed line, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just remember talking to you and you're like, this is great. This reminds me why I started designing, why I started making jigs.
Yeah.
And I really like hearing that from people. And the thing is, um, sometimes guys get wrapped up in what hook you're using and all these other things. That's
Mm-hmm.
fine. A lot of companies use different hooks, right? But to be able to talk about design and talk about influence behind some of those things is kind of a cool thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And like I said, like just like tomorrow in the shop, I'm going in, I'm laying out all our tabs and categorizing those tabs so I can start working on the next new colors we're going to come out with. So it's really fun on those days where I'm not just making tackle and finishing tackle and handling the everyday business stuff. And I
sure,
get to actually sit down and say, okay, we want a brown and orange jig. Let's come up with a new one. We want to replace the color in our lineup that's not selling as well as we want. We want to freshen up the line. So we'll go through and say, we need this color, something in this color range, and something in this color range. And
sure.
it's really fun to lay out that stuff and get input from the
Oh,
guys in the shop because everybody's different. Like everybody's
yes.
so different. And for us to like do that, it gives us a good feel of what the customer would really enjoy is from all the different guys in the shop, what they really like about certain colors and the design part of it.
John, let me ask you a question on let's go with the swim jig line, okay? As an example. Talk to me about the size hooks you guys are using in your swim jig line. Is there a difference between the various weights or what you're
No,
thinking on that?
we go with straight 4/0 hooks. Like I've tried the bigger ones,
Okay.
but I mean, unless it's a custom order, we're going to go straight 4/0 hooks. I really feel like for us, like, and from making them over the years, that size hook works the best for me. Even in the flipping jig, like, some guys, there was a trend there for a while. Everybody wanted giant hooks in their jigs.
Right.
And we found really quick, like even the guys that I know that fish around here that are professionals, they're like, dude, the 4/0 hook lands me more fish, keeps me not hung up all the time. So in our swim jig, we do use just a 4/0 hook in the 3/8 and the halves.
That's interesting you say that because it's funny because I was thinking this recently and I said, um, I just started thinking that, and I'll be honest because I just got done, John. So I posted a short little reel because Instagram wants you to post reels now, and I'm thinking, yeah, I don't care. I like posting pictures, but I'll throw a reel up once in a while. So
Right.
I had the pot on in the garage last night, and I was pouring up. I got a hook restock order that came in, and I was pouring. It was it was the unweighted or the weighted jig hook mold from Do It Molds, right?
Right.
And
Yeah, I
so
saw it.
it's an underbelly, right? It's an
Right.
underbelly weighted. You put a screw pin on the top. I use them for small paddle tailed swim baits. But anyway, I have 3/0, 4/0. I have all these larger sizes, but I said, oh my gosh, I said I can't. The 3/0 is too big for some of the smaller swim baits that I want to throw. So I go,
Yeah.
I want to make one as a 1/0. And it's funny because I would rather throw a swim bait, a paddle tailed swim bait with an exposed hook any day of the week on a ball head. But I'm
Right.
trying to diversify and be able to use it for like fishing ponds and
Yeah.
stuff like that with a little bit of grass and so I got 1/0 in And I was so happy to go out and pour these. I'd forgotten to order them probably honestly for the past 6 months. And finally I got them in and I go, I'm going to pour these. And I go, man, this is my favorite jig type feature that I poured in the last 6 months. And it was just an underbellied weighted jig hook.
Right.
So,
just a simple thing.
And
like in the swim baits with hook sizes, you got to be very careful. Like they're so sensitive to hook size. And it's very hard to make a swim bait jig head that fits everybody's stuff, because everybody throws between a 3.5, 4, 5-inch bait, and you just can't make one jig head to fit everything. And that's one thing. Like we only have one swim bait jig head in our lineup right now, and it's just a little finesse swim bait head with a screw lock on it, just for fishing finesse type stuff. But like before, when I was making swim jig heads, I mean, dude, I would go from 1/0 to 5/0, sometimes 6s, depending on what those guys are putting in them. Because I always ask the customer, what are you putting on it? I need to know that, because I want to make sure that hook is going to fit that bait the right way and make it swim properly.
That's a great point, because to be honest with you, that's something we haven't talked about on Jig Squad before. But on swim jigs, it all depends on what the mold, whether it's a spin cast, a mold you pour yourself for the guy at home, or whatever it is. What's interesting is how that jig is molded it's a big deal, because after the head of the jig, so it's not even as much about the hook size anymore. It's about where the weight of the lead goes on the hook, right? Because if you have more weight on the hook of the shank of the hook, that bait's going to sit a little further back. And what's crazy is there's been times river fishing where I've watched the lights go on and lights go off because of the size swim bait jig that I was using. And what I mean by that, and it wasn't on a skirted jig, but the same is applicable and applies. How far that paddle tail hangs off the back of the bend of the hook matters. It really matters in terms of action. It matters in terms of how much roll is going to be in the bait. And I put paddle tails on the back of jigs before, and it was 3/4 of the way down the bait, and then I didn't get bit. And I'd switch over to a smaller size jig head that only covered half of the body of that paddle tail, and it was like the feed bag was on, because the action imparted just changed dramatically. And so I can only imagine, but in a swim jig, when you for your swim jigs as an example, that is a little bit back from the head of what I mean is the surface area where you could put a trailer or a paddle tail on the back of a swim jig. That's a little further back than the head, right? So
So you have you have your collar for your skirt, and then you have a barb keeper. So that lead is running back, because we pretty much use like just a regular casting jig head for our swim jig, because I really like the way it comes through cover. The balance is good on it, and we're in the process of prototyping a swim jig that has the same balance. It may have a few tweaks and things we want to improve on the design. But I'm holding one right here, and this is like just a regular.
This is what I love. Let me make you big. Hold on.
Just a regular casting swim jig. Like it's just a casting mold. Basically, it's basically a do it. So, and that's like our baby gill color. I like to put BizBase makes a really good crawl trailer called a cutter crawl, but I'll put a paddle tail on it. I really feel like what you're hitting on there is the profile too. Like it's like throwing a big jig all day and then you switch to a finesse jig.
Right.
They're still on a jig bite, but the profile changes and then you're getting bit again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's strange, but the profile of the jig to me makes a huge difference in whether you're getting bites or not.
You know what? I love that comment so much, because you know what's funny? So what I've said on this show many times, I'm going to repeat it now because it's just part of our discussion, John. And the rest, the people in chat, if they've heard it before, they've heard it before. But what I've told many people, a lot of times on a jig, whether it be on the bottom and even a swim jig, sometimes I put a straight-tailed finesse worm on, and sometimes it might be half. I just adjust the size on how much I want to come out the back. Man, I'm telling you, I am absolutely in love with the way what you can make a jig do with just the jig as opposed to the trailer. And I'm going to be brutally honest. I haven't said it like this before on the show. I think more guys or more fisher people are concerned with the trailer that they're putting on the back of their jig than they are the jig themselves. And tell me I'm wrong, but I got to tell you, anytime I ever hear on any show or podcast where people are talking about it, and that's not to knock anyone, all the conversation, and look at me, I should talk because I'm the one that started talking about paddle tails, right? But the reality is, what my thing is the size of the trailer coming off, and you keyed on it about this, the profile that it's creating, and profile when it comes to a paddle tail. Yeah, maybe it flaps and people could talk about height of the profile, but really all the trailer is going to do is add length to the profile. It's not going to add bulk or a silhouette of a bait fish. It doesn't do that. So I don't know. I guess I kind of think about it like I prioritize the order of what I'm looking for in the jig. Sometimes a little bit different. There's guys that say you can't fish this type of jig without a paddle tail.
Yeah.
Well,
I like as far as the jig design itself, I like a jig that's balanced depending on what type of jig it is. But the balance of the jig is very important. And as far as trailers goes, I just break them down into 3 types. I've got a swimming trailer, which could be a paddle tail, could be a crawl swimming bait.
Okay.
I've got what I call a flapping bait, like a Z crawl or something like that. And then I've got what I call the glider, which is basically a chunk with like a big salty zoom chunk. It just glides, doesn't do anything. So like flipping or pitching or skipping a jig, I break it down into that category of gliding, swimming, flapping. Swimming and flapping are very close to me and like what the fish like. I think you could go either way there, but there's something about a gliding chunk on a bait versus a swimming chunk that just shines at certain times, you know?
John, funny enough, so Cumberland Pro Lures was on last week, and he was talking about putting on the old school Zoom super salty chunk, the large one, on the back. And talking about how it creates that flow profile in the back, and he's like, you got to see it to understand it, where it's not as much flapping like a crawl, like crawl flappers like you would get out of like some of the stuff you got on biz baits or like the Paku craw and other things like that. But it just changes it, and it makes it. Funny enough, it was enough. Now you're saying it this week. So 2 weeks, 2 shows in a row, the Southern boys are talking to me about a glide profile. Talk to me about that. So give me an example. What would be some back end baits that you would put on for that glide profile to get that effect with the jig?
Well, the big salty from Zoom is a big chunk, so it gives the bait a lot more bulk.
Yes.
But it's the way the bait falls. And we'll skip under a dock here in the South, and we'll basically swim that jig back out.
Okay.
But it's not like the old Alabama shake, like the Alabama boys swim a jig when they're just shaking it completely.
Right.
It's like stroking it out underneath there. And that gliding and falling action of that chunk, there's something about it that just really triggers fish. Now, I'm not saying that a swimming chunk won't work or a flapping chunk, because it seems like as the water gets really hot in the summer, they tend to like that more action type trailer.
Sure. Okay.
Especially in the cooler water, they like that gliding, falling chunk action. For me, I can't really say why it works better sometimes, but there's times when that thing will get more bites than a guy throwing like a swimming style chunk. And I don't know what it is, but it just has a more flowing, natural action. It's not doing a lot.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, you think about like finesse fishing, a lot of those baits don't do anything.
Yeah, I kind of like how you describe it because like a flapping bait and a paddle-tailed swim bait as a trailer are kind of going to give you the same type of thing. It's just a single
Somewhat,
or a
yeah.
double, right?
Yeah.
Somewhat. It's not the same. I understand that. But it's interesting because now you brought up a whole nother concept of like stroking a jig.
Yeah.
You'll hear people talk about stroking a jig, but you don't hear people talking about stroking a jig after you're throwing it under docks and bringing it
Yeah.
out. That
Yeah.
is see, this is why everyone told me they're like, Murph, you gotta start talking to the Southern boys a little bit and get them on because to be honest with you, John, I mean, and it's not that you guys don't have that. You've got finesse profile jigs too. But I mean, us northern guys and like we talk about all these things, but when I'm stroking a jig, it's in 20 some feet of water on the Great Lakes and open water, like early in the year, so like it's so interesting to hear like these terms and talk about these and other things. And it's not like we don't throw docks, we throw docks, we pitch docks, we fish for largemouth too. But that's not. It's a whole different world when we're talking about some of the things we talk about when it's like smallmouth chasing, or a lot of times even river fishing. There's two different types of river fishing in my mind. There's river fishing where you're fishing docks, which is a lot of features like like you're fishing a lake, and then there's moving water and fishing eddies and and current lines. And it's so unique to me. I just enjoy hearing all these different styles and techniques. John, let me ask you a question. Tell me about this. Talk to me about how much skirt material you are putting in your jigs and what you're thinking on that regarding what it does to a jig.
Right. So, I mean, I've seen some jigs out there that have a ton of skirt material in them. And I'll just give you an idea. Like, the Brevarney swim jig is one of the best finesse jigs out there. Like as far as it has very little skirt material in it. It's very thin.
Correct.
And then I see guys make they'll put 4 tabs of material in one, and it's super bulky. So I don't know that there's a perfect balance of what that is. To me, it's about 2 tabs of material. I feel like that's a good balance between too much and too little. Because you can always take it out. You just can't add it.
Yeah. It's funny, John, and I asked this question because a friend of mine that comes on the show once in a while had said, Mike, I think it sounds like sometimes you get critical with how much material guys will use in a jig. And I said, okay. I said, I bring it up a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I didn't process it that way for myself, right? And so I thought about it a little bit because I thought, well, shoot, people are going to interpret what I say and stuff differently, and I have to be conscious of that. So I always want to bring this topic up, and part of the reason is because my design style doesn't need to be the way everyone else's is. So I'm in line with the Brevarney boys, right? And just that scene, and those are the type of things I make. But I will tell you this: if you look at Jigsquad, like what I repost of designers on Instagram, one of the funniest things is probably 3/4 of the jigs I post are 2 to 3 tabs worth of material, right? So it's not on the low end, even though I personally like my own designs to be less. And fairly, I'll be honest with you, some of my tried and true combos of jigs that I still use to this day, and I've been fishing them for 15 plus years, are jigs that have 2.5 to 3 tabs in them. And I'm not afraid to admit that, but I will say this: if it's anything new I'm designing, it doesn't have that much in there. It's much less. And I even try to see how little I could get away with sometimes.
Right. And it depends on the material too. Like
it really does.
Rubber versus flat rubber, or square rubber, or silicone. They're all different. Like sometimes I just look at a jig and think like that has the right amount of material in it. But really, I just like when I'm fishing, the amount of material in my jig really controls the fall rate as well as the trailer.
Yes.
Like a lot of times I won't switch weights of a jig, but I'll change my trailer. Because really, like, if I'm skipping or fishing a jig, I like a 1/2 ounce jig most of the time. where I won't use a 3/8. I'll just use a bulkier trailer or something to change the fall rate. That's kind of the way I look at skirt material in a jig. If it's got a ton of skirt material in it, it's going to have a slower fall rate for sure.
Right.
And if you want it to fall faster, you can trim some of it out or change your trailer.
Here's another thing that I don't think a lot of people talk about too, John. I'll give you an example. So first of all, I don't think that 3/4 more than that. I would say 80+% of fishermen out there don't think about the weight of what they're throwing when they're throwing it. And what I mean by that is if they pull a 3/8 ounce jig out, they think I'm throwing a 3/8 ounce jig. But when you throw a 4-inch paddle tail on the back, that adds so much weight. And I don't know what it weighs out to, but let me give you an example. I had bought some baits for saltwater, right? And it's called a little mullet, and it's basically meant to be like a glide bait. And it's a heavier plastic. It's a 5-inch glide bait, pretty dense. And I said, the way everyone throws this is on an underbellied weighted hook with a screw lock on it, right? On the eyelet, the clip-ons. And everyone's talking about different weights and what they're throwing. I go, you know what? I can make these myself, right? But then I go, I kind of know how much I want it to weigh. And so I go, I'm going to weigh this plastic. John, I weighed this plastic. It was almost an ounce.
Oh, yeah.
I almost fell over. I go, now that's not as much of the trailers we're putting on the back of our jigs. But I will say, I guarantee that some of these trailers we're putting on the back of these jigs are well over 1/8 of an ounce.
Oh, for sure. And you can take, like, across the industry, buy jigs from every manufacturer they are and weigh them. Every one of them is going to be different. If it says it's a 1/2 ounce, it might be close to 3/4.
That's right.
Are they weighing it when they spin the head or cast the head, or are they weighing it as a complete unit with the weed guard and the skirt material on it? So it's kind of relative to you don't know exactly what the weight of the jig is. You're just basically going off what's on the package, unless you weigh it.
And, and I think, for us is from the bass end of things, I think one of the reasons we're able to basically get away with all this without it really mattering much is because we're pitching, right?
Exactly.
It changes fall rate. Unquestionably changes fall rate. But the interesting thing is that volume is going to change fall rate as well. It's no different than when people talk about putting chatterbaits on the back paddle tails on the back of chatterbaits. I always say, I don't want a paddle tail on the back of my chatterbait. I want my chatterbait. I want to change the weight of my chatterbait itself to do what I want it to do. Right.
Right. Exactly.
And because paddle tails will drastically change the lift. And people will talk about turning them upside down and everything else. Sure, you can do all those things. But the average fisherman, right, doesn't spend their time talking about this stuff and thinking about it like we do,
Yeah. Really, I want the chatterbait or bladed jig to do what it's supposed to do. I really don't want the trailer to do much more than just move. I don't want it lifting it. I don't want it dragging it down. I just want it to move, because, if you've ever seen one in the water, if it's moving, doesn't matter if it's swimming or flapping or vibrating back and forth, the chatterbait is doing its job by the blade and the action of that skirt and everything on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. John, one of my buddies, he's a spinnerbait nut. And I will tell you, over the years, I've come and gone with my love of fishing spinnerbaits, and mostly based out of what I'm doing and where I'm fishing. But it always comes back. But the funny thing is, my buddy, he still to this day, 20+ years, he's been using. Do you remember the old? I guess they still sell them now, right? The old, they're just like a worm, cylindrical type of small little body with 2 little long tails off of them. You know what I'm talking about? The old school long spinnerbait trailers.
That's what I use on my baits.
he swears by these, and I just kind of laugh when we all talk about trailers and everything all the time, because I go, there's guys out there talking about putting all different types of stuff on the back of spinnerbaits, but I think back to that and I go, Man,
Yeah.
Jimmy just likes to throw those thin little profile things on the back of his spinner bait.
A little Burke used to make a flat twin tail trailer. It's
Okay.
basically a flat little bait with 2 twin tails. It's a really good chatterbait trailer too. But
White Whale just said that. Yeah.
yeah, so that's my go-to split tail or trailer for a spinnerbait is that twin tail, especially in I don't really care for the swimming or the big grubs and stuff on my spinner baits. I just want action, sort of like with a chatterbait. I just want something moving back there. And really, it's just adding a little bit of bulk to the bait or more than anything.
Yeah. I agree with you. All right, so let's talk about your jigs a little bit more, John. So
Okay.
we talked about the different varieties. Of course, I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't always go to the swim jigs, but I love swim jigs,
Right.
And so what would you say out of your jig line, what is the most popular of everything you guys have?
Okay. So if you're talking about swim jigs, probably I would say our baby gill color because it emulates the bluegill so well.
You hold that up again because you had that earlier.
Yeah, I have one rigged up, but that's it right there. It looks like it's a lot more orange in it just with the camera, but it's like some smoke blue flake, some green pumpkin purple, a little bit of this magic crawl color. It actually has 5 colors in it.
I like that paint job on the head too.
Yeah, it just has a little touch of orange on the head. It's kind of a magic crawl head. Probably that one or just our regular Glimmer Ghost, which is basically white in the swim jig. That's my favorite.
Okay. And then what about what would you say in the other categories? What's some of the most popular colors?
Right. Same thing with like the flipping jig. The Mel crawl color is probably the most versatile color we sell.
Okay.
And GP brown, but I mean, year after year, black and blue is always the most highest selling color in a flipping jig. Like I don't throw a black and blue a lot, but overall, if we go back and look at sales, black and blue is king still, which is different to me, but like that's what I get for thinking what I do when other people throw black and blue a lot more than I do,
Yeah, I hear you. Hold on. I'm going to tell my son to go grab something for me real quick. I'm going to keep talking.
Okay.
I just popped up on my laptop. Says your battery is running low. I'm going to have him go get. Hey, can you do me a favor? Can you go out in my car on the floor of the passenger seat and grab my charger for the laptop and bring it up to me? Floor of the passenger seat. Yes. Thanks, buddy.
Yep.
I guess that's what we do. We call our kids when they're in the house with us now.
Yeah.
That's
yeah, so that in the flipping jig. Then when we go to like the finesse ball head jig, our little rock star jig.
Yeah.
And that's a tough one because we have some really good colors and they're kind of spread out over the broad spectrum of everywhere. I can't say one's better than the other, but GP brown is probably the one to go to. It's probably our most popular color, just because it's a very natural color. It's just very natural brown GP.
It's funny, John, because I'm going to raise my hand. I'm going to be brutally honest right now. As much as I really love black and blue, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell you, I think it might be one of the least used colored jigs for myself, which is crazy because if you were to ask me and say what's probably one of the most successful jig colors, it would be that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I don't use it. It's always, to me, there's 3 different colors that are like I'm psychotic about. It's green pumpkin of some variety or shade,
right?
White, and then I like an oddball. So It's so funny to me because I have some cool little black and blue designs that I've had over the years, and I don't know what it is. I just don't fish it all the time, and I probably should. As an example, I'm going to a little get together with the Do It people in September on the Mississippi River, and some of the crew from around the country is going to be coming in. So I'm looking forward to that. But so Brennan Chapman from Do It Mold says, "Hey, here's some colors and some lures and things that work well and where we're going on the Mississippi. And every single category had white and then black and blue. Talking about
Yeah,
jig colors or swim jig colors and stuff. And I just kind of laughed. I go, well, I have plenty of those. I don't fish the black and blues much. With the whites I fish.
Yeah,
But anyway,
in our football jig, probably, our football jig has round rubber and silicone in it. So we go with a base color round rubber and then add silicone for accent. But the Texas crawl color is solid. It's just a brown rubber with some black and some orange in it and a little bit of pumpkin. It's just Texas crawl. It's the basic color, but it seems to work really well on. Yeah, probably a number one selling color in the football jig for sure.
So speaking of orange, I have no idea where I saw this the other day, John. I saw a jig, and once in a while you see certain colors. A lot of things, like you said, there's a lot of appreciation for other people's things. I saw somebody that had just a plain jig head that was painted, wasn't a skirted jig or anything. They were just posting, and the color was like a I'm just gonna call it silver. There might have been a little bit of flash in it, like maybe hologram type of, but let's just call it primary body was silver. The back and top of it was like a navy blue, not like a bright blue, like a navy blue, and it had a real small little orange throat on the underside of it.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I was looking at this jig and I go, good gosh, look at this jig. Like I sat there and I said, most of the time it's just, hey, I appreciate that jig. I like that color. But I saw this color and I go, I got to make that jig. You know what I mean? Like there's times where, and orange, that's what it is. Orange excites the heck out of me. And any way I could try and incorporate it into some designs. The only time I don't, and I kind of want to, is with like a white swim jig, but I want to incorporate some orange colored, bright orange colored undertones into like a swim jig. I just think it would look slick as all get out. And let's be honest, anything with white looks good. Chartreuse and white, even a little green pumpkin and white. How come we don't see more of that, John? Why don't we see more green pumpkin and white in a swim jig?
I don't know. I mean, we have done those before, like with a blueback herring style bait where we have.
Yes, exactly.
Because we have a swim jig called BB Herring, and it has like a magic crawl green pumpkin back.
Yes.
Fish scale on the side in the middle of the jig, and it has like just a pearl bottom. And it's a solid color. I mean, we have that in our spinnerbait and swim jig line, and it sells. Like people buy it, they catch fish on it. It's a great color. The contrast, I've even seen a lot of guys using like black and white as a contrast, and it seems to work really good.
Yeah. It's funny because when you talk about bait fish, you're talking like, oh gosh, emerald shiners, creek chubs. Yeah. There are so many different types of things. Like there's a bite that my friends get on ice fishing on the Great Lakes, and I'm not going to say where, but there's a bite that they get on the Great Lakes for walleye when they're ice fishing. And I'm not an ice fishing guy. It's not my jam. But they go after, what do they call them? They say they're using red-bellied chubs. I'm like, I don't even know what a red-bellied chub is. But when people talk and say these things, I start thinking in my head, I go, oh, what would that look like in a color if I was to make a jig like that? You know? But green pumpkin and white, think of all the different bait fish that this thing imitates, So
absolutely. Yeah.
What a great color, Yeah.
All right, John. I tell you, a really cool color is to take like blue glimmer and white and put some orange in it, like on a swim jig.
With orange?
Yeah, it does look really good. I don't know why, but it's just, maybe it's our eyes looking at it, but it just looks really good. It flows really good. And, like I've caught fish on it. I don't know if it makes a difference to have the orange in there or not, but I mean,
and what is it, John? White, blue glimmer, shimmer, whatever the heck, with a little bit of orange.
Yep, just a little bit of orange, like bright orange, but only about 3 strands max.
Yes, just a little bit.
Yeah.
I kind of, I'll tell you a color. I haven't posted in a while. If people go back and dig through my stuff, they'll be able to find it. But I have a bluegill pattern that I kind of
Mm-hmm.
am fanatical about. Like everyone has their own bluegill pattern, right? And
Right.
mine I just absolutely love. But one of the things that I put in my bluegill pattern, and people go back and find it, they could pick through it and really parse through the different colors I put in there. They're not the typical ones that people put in, and that's the cool thing about everyone's bluegill patterns.
Right.
But what I put a couple of strands of the what is it? It's pumpkins. It's a fire tail. It's a pumpkin seed with an orange fire tail on it.
Yeah, it's
And
like it's a hot crawl.
it's a hot craw. Yeah. And
Yep.
and the cool thing about it is it adds just enough orange where it's on the back end of the trailer or on the tail of the jig where
Yep.
it's not through the whole body because I introduced some blue. And
Yep.
I just think it's the bee's knees, right?
Oh yeah. I mean that's one of the colors that's in like the mail crawl color is like a few strands of that hot crawl, and it sets it off. Because I mean, bluegill across the country are so many different colors. You could have, down in Florida they're black. They're like black and blue and purple, like very dark colors. And then you have some that's more muted colors, more grays and very washed out colors. And then you have some that has like some orange on it and some teal blue. You have so many different colors of bluegills. That's why you see so many different cool bluegill colors. I mean, we had 3 at one time. We had like our regular bluegill, and then we had baby gill, and then we had one we called bull gill, which was a very dark, like a purple, green pumpkin swirl color with a little bit of orange in it. It was really cool.
Interesting. It's I think John DeMay is one of my buddies. He's a Chicago area guy. John DeMay from the Chicago area, Dem Jigs. Maybe you want to kill me when he watches this and sees that I say this about him. But I saw him put it was, I want to call it cantaloupe, like a cantaloupe color for his bluegill. And I just looked at it, I go, look at that. It was almost a little more pinkish. And I go, oh my God, look at this. It was so, and I've said it before on the show, the thing that excites me the most of jig patterns, if I was to say a color profile, it's bluegill. I love seeing what people come up with for bluegill colors. And the same thing, somebody was just saying, the blue is got I think it was White Whale possibly said it above, it's got to, I'm thinking that, oh no, it was Anthony. He says, I'm thinking that would look like a sunfish with the orange. Yeah. I mean, it's so many cool looking color profiles. And I don't know, it just orange excites me because there's so much to do with it. I do like your that blue shimmer idea. I kind of want to play around with that a little bit. There's a couple of the Nature's Edge colors that I really like that I want to maybe mess around with that a little bit for some color.
That orange color you're talking about, like that cantaloupe or that kind of peachy orange color,
yes,
is the color I would use in that blue glimmer and white jig. It's not super bright, but it really looks good with that blue glimmer. I don't know why.
Well, it's almost like it's I don't. Well, maybe you could call it almost moving towards translucent, right?
Yeah,
it's light. It's I could just see it mixing in with that blue shimmer really well.
Yeah,
what a great idea! It's fun, and you know what the thing is? I always tell people, I'm like, I don't mind talking about these things because if somebody's got the gumption to go buy the tabs and put things together, then by all means, do as you will. Right?
I mean, that's why we're all doing it. It's fun to just take some. I mean, sometimes it's like just get out of the box a little bit and go, to left field and put some stuff together and see what it looks like,
All right. So listen, I appreciate Mario here because he just made a comment and it reminded me of something that you and I talked about, John. So his comment is pink and orange make a great saltwater jig color for cobia, very bright combination. Mario, is that New York, Mario? Comment in chat if that's you, Mario. I think it's you. I think it's New York, Mario. But John, so guys, listen. So John and I are talking the other day, and the thing that we were talking about is things that start, and we haven't talked about this a ton on the show, and this is introducing blue, plays off of blue shimmer a little bit, but it's more like the blue craw type of profile for, let's talk about blue crabs in tidal waters. Right. So talk to me about that a little bit, John, because I think there's people that buy your jigs that are using some of these things for, tidal water fishing. that
Right.
that they may be hunting or focusing on blue crabs.
Yeah, I wish I had a picture. I actually have a picture. I could probably post it on Jigsquad or send it to you. It's
Okay.
one of the first blue crab imitators, because the guy called me. He fished the James River and Potomac and all that stuff, and he's like, "I want you to make this jig for me." And he told me the colors he wanted in it, and I built it. And it didn't look like great to me, but it was like exactly what he wanted. And he went out there and caught fish on it. And he's like, man, that's what the crabs look like in my body of water. They're not like your typical blue crab. They have a little bit different color tones of green in them.
Okay.
And we built that, but I feel like the tidal guys kind of overlook the bass eating blue crabs, because the blue crabs go way up into the river systems from the coast. So, I mean,
they do, don't they?
Yeah. And I mean, if you're in the realm of a blue crab color, you're also in the realm of a bluegill color, I think, and also just a regular crawfish color. So, I mean, that would be what I will be throwing on the tidal rivers. But with that being said, sometimes the darker colors reign on these tidal rivers over like a blue crab color jig for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I mean the craws will go through various stages as well, where you'll catch them, at different times of the season, where they'll be bluish brown. I call it the ProTech Magic Craw colors, right?
Yeah.
Just because those are the things I have in my mind. But interesting enough, like you hear the guys on the Chesapeake and them talking about the the tidal flow and blue crab and things like that. And some guys don't talk about it, but I will tell you, once you start hearing little bits and pieces, you start to put things together. As an example, there's a reason why guys absolutely love GP and blue on the Chesapeake Bay.
Right.
There's a reason for that. And so that extends all the way down the entire coastline. And what's crazy is I'm in Chicago and I don't have any of that. But I will tell you, there are times where that blue crawl type of color is fantastic. And I think you said it right earlier, John. Once you could create something, that has a multi-species or bait fish type of you cover, whether it be bluegill, sunfish family, craw, now you're talking, right?
Yeah.
And now you're trying to replicate. It's not a shot color. It's not a classic white profiled swim jig. You could get away with a lot of stuff by adding that blue craw in.
Right.
And it excites me because I think, and here's why it excites me, not because of what it might imitate. It excites me because there are so many different types of colors and different types of skirting materials out there that can replicate that type of profile. I think the possibilities are endless. It would be like making bluegill jigs. There's that many types of varieties of what you can use.
Yeah, you talk about the blue crab, like up there, like the Chesapeake Bay, Upper Chesapeake, Potomac, James River. If most of those guys that fish those bodies of water, every one of them probably has a stick bait in their boat that's GP blue swirl or something in that category. You know the magic crawl blue swirl color stick bait a lot of guys throw. They love that color there. I mean, it looks like a blue crab. I mean, they throw it like religiously up there.
Gary here highlights the point of just in fishermen, just we don't have a full understanding of their visions, colors, shades that they can actually see. It's so true. And I will say this is my opinion of color, right? I will tell you this. If you ask a Clearwater fisherman whether color matters, they're going to tell you it sure the heck does.
Yeah.
And they're going to say that. And you ask other people and they're going to say, no, it doesn't. But what I'll say on this is I hate this. I learned this out of doing a lot of studying of snook fishermen, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
And basically the snook fishermen would throw big old flare hawks underneath the bridges. And so Matt's in here, South Jersey fisherman. He knows some of this too, because he follows all the salt stuff and fishes salt too. But these big old, they love, it's all about silhouettes to them. right?
Right.
It's all about color, what the change in colors do for silhouettes and what it looks like to them. Because what's funny is what they're fishing when they're fishing big bridges at night is the shade lines and the lights off the bridges, and they work their flare hawks to sweep them along those and into those lines, and that's where they get slammed by the bigs. And I only started learning about this in the last couple of years, right? But what it's done for me is to remind me that, you know what, the argument of color, I guess whether they can or in between, it's undeniable that they can see shades of, right? It's a dark profile or it's a lighter profile. And what does that look like in the water? And I think that alone excites the heck out of me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And two, like, it depends on the way the fish is looking at something. If they're looking up at something near the surface, most everything is just going to have a silhouette. I don't feel like you can really see the color as much. If it's on the bottom, to me, if a fish can see color, like, we don't actually know this for a fact, but if a fish can see color, I feel like if they're looking down on something with the sun shining on it, I think that they should be able to differentiate between tones, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because if you know how it is, if you're in a swimming pool and something goes over your head on the pool, like somebody drug something across, it just looks black. If light can't get through it, you know?
Right. And the thing is, and maybe it's a depth of water thing, you know, maybe it changes so much when you go into shallow water, you know?
Yeah, this about color to me, as far as just fishing jigs and colors, and, you know, just with dealing with everybody and so many different customers liking different colors. I think confidence is more important in a jig color than color itself.
I agree with that.
Fishing. I feel like he's going to present the bait better. He's going to fish it better. He's going to know that if I put this thing in the right places, it's going to get bit. You know, like, for me, I feel like confidence is more important than color. I think if you're in the ballpark of where you need to be on color, I don't care if it's 18 shades different than this way or that way. I think confidence to me is more important than the color itself.
You know, that's a great comment. And, you know, it's funny because, like, when you talk even like about like the oddball colors work when you get bid on one and you decide to make more, right? It doesn't mean that they don't all work. Sometimes everyone knows this. There's a fishing mystique that occurs out. I can recall, John, I remember being up on the Door County Peninsula on the far northern end of the Door County Peninsula, fishing for smallmouth. And we found this channel, and I'll never forget, we parked the boat on this channel out in the middle of nowhere. And I kid you not, it was one of the biggest bonanzas of fish. The numbers of fish we caught that I could all, and they were all on a tube. And just out of respect for my friend, I'm not going to say what the color was because it's not my color. But at the end of the day, it was one of those things where I've never felt so connected to my bait in my entire life. And I will tell you this, since that day, I could tell you, I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of this tube color, and I don't share it with anyone. And I save it for when I'm with that one buddy, and I'll never go through them all. I have enough to last me until I think time will be gone. And the funny thing is, no one fishes this color. And you know how that goes, right? It's one of those things. I felt so connected. I just recall that time. And so anytime you get confidence in what you're fishing and you have success with it, you're likely to replicate that. Why? Because you guys all know I'm in education, but my background is in psychology, and I'll just I'll leave it like that, right? But how you process things is extremely important. And when you have success with things, right, you are likely to replicate those instances because you had some physiological response to what happened. And so it's an amazing phenomenon. And there's plenty of times in my life that I've never come close to achieving that feeling, but there are a few. And when you do, man, that's like using an oddball color and you're like, this is lights out the best.
Right. And I like the comment about contrast, because that I do see the importance of that, the contrast. And I think sometimes you kind of either have to go natural or you got to stand out. You know what I mean?
It's a good comment.
You know what I mean?
Good
It's like
comment.
you're either trying to be very, match the hatch kind of person, or you got to stand out. And sometimes that depends on the situation, especially with shad colors, when you have like fish feeding on a ton of shad. And sometimes that bait that stands out from all the rest of the thousands of shad swimming through there ends up being the bait color that you need to be throwing,
That's a good comment too. And funny enough, I will say this, John, I'm not afraid to admit this. I think that I conceptualize and think about shad colors, but I definitely don't design. I don't think I design with trying to diversify shad colors. And it's something I'd like to do,
Right.
And maybe I will. Maybe this winter will be the time that I start trying to build swim jigs where I'm going to try and replicate different shad patterns. But I'll tell you this: I make more jigs than I could ever fish. Right? That's the
Right.
way I kind of look at it, and that's part of the fun of it all. John, let me ask you this, because I don't want this featured to talk about it. Here's another cool little thing that we kind of talked about too. So when you're making your skirted jig, so you're predominantly your jig designs that you're making business wise, all skirted jigs, correct? I mean,
Yeah.
silicone or rubber skirted jigs.
Exactly. Yes.
And you were finishing those jigs in what style? Are you wire tying? Are you hand tying? And what do you think about the difference between the two?
Okay. Well, I don't hate any type of hand tying. Like, I like any type of hand tie jig. I despise bands. I just hate them.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's the reason I started making baits, is to hand tie my own jigs.
Right.
Right. So I like thread tying, but for time's sake, and over the years when I've made them to sell, I use wire just because of the speed. I don't feel like, there's arguments over thread versus wire. We kind of touched on that when we were talking, but
Yep.
really, like, I like this. As long as you have the correct size wire, I feel like you can tie a nice jig with wire. And that's what we do in our shop, just for time's sake, really, more than anything. But like, they are secure, they're not coming off. It makes the skirts flare right as long as it's tightened correctly and all that. But that's my thinking on it. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not saying any version of any hand tying is bad. I'm just saying for our production in our shop, that's what we do. And we do it on everything. We don't send anything out with a skirt that's not hand tied, whether it be buzz baits, spinner baits, jigs.
All right, let me ask this. So I think one of the other things that we talked about that I kind of want to highlight too is that I is wire diameter, right? And I believe you said that you like using 22 gauge, correct?
Yep.
All right. So folks, whether you're in chat or you're listening on replay, the reason I'm bringing this up is because right now I use 26 gauge.
Hang on just a second. Let me grab my wire and make sure I'm telling you correct.
Oh my God. Don't do this. You were gonna get me to go get some 22. I've been talking about it forever. I said I wanted to start using some 22, but go ahead. I want to see.
Actually, we use 24 and 22 depending on the skirt itself.
I understand. Yeah.
Those are the two gauges we use the most. I've used 26 before, and I feel like it's
too
really
thin.
Yeah, it's too thin.
It to me is too thin, and I don't know how else to describe it. I use it, but I just feel it's too thin, and I want to go down in the wire diameter that I'm using. And I feel I've worked in other areas of this life and with 22 and 24 gauge, and I totally feel that I will be fine with it, and I know what it looks like. But I want to play around with it a little bit more. And it's crazy because I'll tell you, when I'm using 6 gauge, I feel compelled to do extra wraps, and I almost don't want to do extra wraps with the 26 gauge. I don't want that volume. And I'll a couple different reasons. One, because I think that even though it's thinner diameter, I think that it also creates, it changes the splay of the second half of the skirting material, right? And it
Right.
changes the volume of what it looks like. And so I basically want to go less. And there are some people that I don't think feel they can maybe accomplish it if they went down, or excuse me, to a larger diameter wire. I
Yeah,
feel that I
you can
can,
get
and
too
I
big.
want to try it.
Yeah, you can get too big with it too. This is really depends on your collar too. On the jig. But some collars they have a broader space for you to tie, and some are
Yeah,
really
that's
tight.
true.
And that's why we use at least 2 or 3 wraps depending on the jig.
Yeah, I get that. And listen, if you're out there and you're somebody that maybe you're not using wire or you haven't started making skirted jigs, I'll just go back to kind of talked about. You don't always have to learn how to use thread, right? You could start off with wire,
Right.
but I think the biggest thing is there's a lot of companies out there. It doesn't matter. Obviously if you want to buy your jigs, right? But if you want to make some jigs too, I think the thing is just go buy some plain jig heads and then buy some skirt tabs and play around. And wire is probably the easiest way to get started because then you're not having to buy a bobbin. And I've heard the advice that people have talked about this winter. I want to do a show and talk about just some basic materials about getting started and some
Mm-hmm.
basic techniques. But the reason it's easy is because you could go to Barlow's Tackle, you could go on Do It site, you can go to Lure Parts Online, and you could buy some pre-made up jig heads. You could buy them plain if you want to paint them, and a couple packs of skirt tabs, and you could be all set to kind of making some of your own custom jigs. And I think it's a good way to feel like you're invested in creating and making things. And I'll say this, for me, it's a tremendous outlet.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
John, I tell the crew all the time, everyone that comes to the show, I'm like, I've never sold jigs. I think back in the day, there was a period of time where friends were giving me a few bucks here and there to cover materials and stuff. And
Yeah.
so for me, it's for the love of the game. I don't have to worry about the appeal of how much is going to sell and not. I just get to make for myself. And to be honest with you, I've given away, John, probably 90% of the jigs I've ever made.
Yeah. And too, like there's a lot of people and forums out there you can get on that everybody's willing to share information and help you out. Because I mean, in all honesty, if you're making jigs for a living, it takes a lot of work. If you're doing it the right way and hand pouring everything and painting it and doing all that. But it's really just fun to get out there and sometimes figure out things on your own too. Like you might find something, you might figure something out that you really like to do that nobody else is doing, and you're like, oh heck, I
Yes.
just came up with something.
There's a burnout from things sometimes. I shouldn't say burnout. I think that it is, I would call it, there's a stress from making things. And what I
Right.
mean by that is, there's a time it happens with buying material. Maybe it's with tackle. And for me, for most jig designers, I think it happens with skirt tabs.
Yeah.
You just have so many things in your head and there's so many things you want to make. For me, it happened when I started learning how to fly tie and use materials. I was like, oh, I gotta have that, I gotta have that, I gotta have this. And next thing you know, I have so many different things that I wasn't making. And a lot of advice for anyone that's out there and thinking about getting started making some things, they always say, have one thing in mind that you want to make, maybe 2 different colored jigs that you want to make, 3
Right.
different colors, but don't go more than that.
Yep.
And then buy the things you need to make those jigs and that material. And then from there you build and expand. And
Yeah.
or you do what Paladin said earlier, and he says, I just buy all my stuff. You know what? Hey, John, Paladin was the one that said earlier that he had, I believe, some of your custom buzz baits, and he had Brian Schmidt, who's in chat, tie up some hair on those buzz baits. And I don't know what these crazy creations turned out to be, but I think they might have been your buzz baits at one point in time. So
Oh, that's cool.
yeah. So I mean, I think I don't know. I personally want to try going down in wire diameter a little bit. When I say down, it's really going up in thickness because it's going from 26 to 24 or 22.
Yep.
I'll
You'll
probably
be good with 24. I mean, when you drop down to 22, it starts getting fairly thick. But 24 is probably a good place to start. I wouldn't go too far the other way.
Okay, that's good advice.
Yep.
And for anyone who's in chat, if you have, here's the thing, you'll hear a lot of different things on this show, and different approaches and styles. And the cool thing is, you're at least hearing people that are on, like John tonight, or other guests that we've had, that are kind of showing you to like, hey, these things all can work. And I think that's the kind of beauty of all of it.
Yep.
What about the future for TrueSouth, John? What do you have in mind for some things coming up? I know you made a mention of coming out with some new colors and stuff like that.
Yep.
Anything else?
We're bringing back some of the stuff that we were making before. Like we're bringing back some different versions of spinner baits. We're bringing back some old colors that guys have really been asking for. We're working on some new versions and some brand new stuff, like as far as buzz baits and stuff like that.
Nice.
We're working on another finesse jig, and like I already said, we're kind of tweaking our swim jig design. So hopefully by next year we'll have a new swim jig head, which will be all our own design and nothing generic. That's what we're trying to get to.
Cool.
But really, man, we're just trying to take care of our customers and give you some great baits at a good price that you can go out there and have confidence in fishing, and making you feel like you're part of our business and helping us succeed where we want to go in the industry.
Which is extremely valuable because as I think there's some people that know this but just haven't heard me say this. And John and I were talking, and I said, here's the thing. I want to anytime you can feel connected or know some more information about the people you buy from, or the jigs you're getting, or some of the story behind them, whether it's John talking about the Mel craw or whatever the heck it is, I don't know. It makes things personal a little bit. And don't get me wrong. If somebody makes a great product, but they're an absolute tool, maybe I'm still going to use their product. But at the end of the day, the fishing industry is a small place. And so, like, if you know things about a designer, a company, their product line, you're able to have a little more history about them. I don't know. It just makes it a little more appealing, and you feel like there's like you're connected with them and there's a relationship with it. And so basically that's been one part of, TrueSouth, and kind of why I've been attracted to their brand. And like I said, funny enough, I didn't even know the connection between them and Biz Bates at first, and Brian Souza. So, I mean, so it makes it all the better. John, I got to tell you, buddy, it was fantastic. I liked a couple of things we, talked about tonight, the blue cross stuff, the tidal fishing, all of it. I would be real interested to maybe get you on as we move into next year again and talk a little bit more. But I mean, I really appreciate you coming on tonight, bud.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on, and I enjoy, looking at everybody's stuff and seeing the creativity they have, and it kind of inspires me to, go back to the shop and like come up with some new stuff on my own, other than just sitting around and like just continuing to produce the same stuff. So I really appreciate being able to come on, and I'd love to come back and like dive into some really like specific stuff if you want to.
Absolutely. I really enjoy it. I also think, John, I keep note of the creators out there that also make spinner baits and buzz baits and all that kind of stuff, because everyone jokes, and I always say, I go, one of these days I'm going to have like a panel of people on to come in and talk about spinner baits and buzz baits and all that stuff too. But I said I at least need to get through a year of doing straight jigs before I start expanding. So, I mean, listen, before we go here, John, I'm going to have you stay in chat, but I just want to throw out to the crew. I took a picture of this. So everyone in chat, or if you're watching on replay, first of all, John's awesome. I appreciate having TrueSouth Custom Lures here tonight. But I just got to tell you, if you're not on Instagram and you don't get to see things, I posted on my story of a lineup of who's all coming on the show for the rest of the year. So, and obviously it was led by John and TrueSouth Custom Lures tonight. But we got some banging shows coming up too. So Next week, Frank Scalish is coming on. After that, oh gosh, One Cast Fishing. My boy from Do It Molds that does stuff with Do It Molds with me. Aaron Diddy's on. Matt Luna Fishing on the fly tackle. Jamie Bruce Fishing. Big Jim McLaughlin from up in Canada. And then Fishing with Weensy from the East Coast. And then, guys, the 29th of December, it's a long way off, but that's going to be the 1-year anniversary show. So I don't know what we're going to plan for that yet. Maybe it'll be a medley of John and all these other great people that we have on stopping in and chatting for a little bit or something crazy. I don't know. But John, I cannot thank you enough. I appreciate you tremendously. And I definitely do want to get you on. So to everyone out there, I appreciate you all. John, stay in chat. Oh, look at John. But hey, guys, you see that? That's the latest. That's one of the sticker lines. Sticker pack number 2.
Yeah, I love that one.
Look at John's dialed in. Guys, I appreciate you tremendously. Remember to hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button. We'll be back in 2 weeks with Frank Scalish. Peace. I'm out.
See you, man.